My name is Nina Morales. I am 36 years old, a woman who keeps color-coded calendars and a portable phone charger in every bag because power and plans should never run out at the same time. And I live in Phoenix, Arizona, in a stucco townhouse that holds heat like a grudge and morning light like a promise. And my job is operations coordinator for a property management company, which means I spend my days turning chaos into bulleted lists, negotiating with vendors who think contracts are poems, and solving problems while smiling at people who do not read emails. And I have a husband named Jason who is kind in the way that makes servers smile and conflict allergic in the way that makes me write the hard texts. And I married into a family that runs on tradition, group chats, and a matriarch named Linda, who believes the best way to love people is to schedule them. And every July, the family goes on 1 week of sun and photographs called the Morales Summer Trip, a rolling festival of matching shirts, coordinated dinners, cousins lined up by height, and captions that say, "Blessed even when the humidity is a threat." And for the last 4 summers, I have handled the logistics because Linda says I have the gift. And I suppose I do. I can smell a blackout date 2 months away. I can find a villa that sleeps 12 and a rental van that seats 15 and still argue the daily rate down by 10. And this year was supposed to be simple. A beach house in San Diego, 2 vans, one dinner reservation at a place with string lights where you can hear the ocean and your own thoughts. And we had settled on a week in August before school started. And I did the thing I always do. I blocked the time off on my work calendar. I shopped for a wide brim hat that would not fly away. I started a meal plan that would actually be cooked and not just photographed. And I put deposits down on 2 rentals and a house with a deck where you can watch the water pretend to be glass. And my name was on every confirmation because it had to be. Corporate discounts live in my portal, not in Linda's. And that is how Act 1 begins, with a plan so clean it gleams like a fresh screen. And then the finger smudge arrives. And it arrived as a text on a Wednesday at 7:12 p.m., 2 months before we were supposed to leave, from my sister-in-law Mariah, who is lovely until she isn't. She wrote a group message that included everyone except she forgot to hide that I had been removed. Because people who stir forget to check the spoon. The screenshot came to me from my cousin-in-law Danny, who is allergic to injustice. It said, "Tiny updates for San Diego. This year is kids and core family, only to keep it intimate. Jason, you're obviously in. Mom and Dad, my kiddos, Luke and Kira, plus the grandparents. We'll do a couples trip in the fall for the outliers, hearts." And then a string of exclamation points that looked like fired nails. And there were responses. Yay. Can't wait. And one that made my jaw tighten. Love the idea of keeping it simple? The women need a break from the planners, and I stared at that sentence while the lasagna beeped in my oven and realized I had been benched from an event I had built. And my first feeling was not hurt. It was curiosity. The cold kind. The kind that shows up with a clipboard and says, "Let's list what we know." And I listed 1. My credit card had been used to secure the house deposit because of the discount code in my account. 2. Both vans were on my corporate portal under my name. 3. The dinner reservation for 12 at the restaurant with the string lights had my phone number for confirmation and a $25 per person no-show policy. 4. The family had named me planner in January. And 5. The same family had just named me outlier in June. And I stood very still in my kitchen and felt my dignity pull a chair up to the table. And then I did the second thing I do when trouble walks in without knocking. I went to the source. I walked into the living room, where Jason was playing a game on his phone, with the volume low, because he tries to protect peace even when the house is on fire. And I said, "Did you know your sister is uninviting me from the trip I booked?" And he blinked like a man who has just realized the test has started, and he did not study. And he said, "I saw the message. I thought she meant like a smaller guest list. And I said, she meant my absence and your presence. And he said, I will call her. And he did. Speaker on because I do not do whispers. And Mariah answered breathless like drama had been running up her stairs. And she said, Hey Jay, what's up? And he said, You uninvited Nina. And she said, We did not uninvite, we just curated. And I said, Hello, I am here. And she said, Oh, hey girl, this was about keeping it intimate and stress-free. You know how you get with schedules. And I said, The schedule is what gets 12 people beds and towels. And she said, We just want to relax without all the rules. And Linda got on the line because she always materializes when tone rises. And she said, Sweetheart, don't make this a thing. We just want to do something with the core family and you can enjoy a week to yourself. Spa, rest, and we'll catch a movie when we get back. And my throat did that thing throats do when you want to yell, but your dignity says no. It wants to speak slow. And I said, To confirm, you are keeping the house I booked, the vans I reserved, the reservation I placed, and you are asking me to rest like a dog told to sit. And Linda said, No one is telling you to sit. We are saying this trip is for immediate family. And I said, I am your son's wife. And she said, That is why you understand. And something in me shifted a quarter inch toward a door I had not planned to use, the one marked, Do not make Nina small. And I said, Then you can make your own arrangements and I will happily be not involved. And Linda exhaled like a judge and said, We'll reimburse you, of course. And because I am myself, I said, Wonderful. Let me send you the invoice with all the numbers that add up to, of course. And we hung up. And Jason looked at me and said, I'm not going without you. And I said, Thank you. And he said, I will talk to them again. And I said, You can, but I will be talking to policies, because policies do not gaslight. Act 2 starts when your temper asks to drive and you hand it the GPS instead. I pulled out my folder of confirmations because I print important things like it is still 2004, and I sat at the dining table with a pen and read like a lawyer. House deposit under my name with a 30-day free cancellation clause. Balance due 15 days prior. Card on file mine. Contact mine. Vans under my corporate portal with free cancellation up to 72 hours before pickup. Add drivers named but not charged until pickup. Dinner reservation with my mobile number and a system that calls me 2 days before to confirm. Not them. And while I wrote, my phone lit with messages from cousins who had quietly exited the group chat Everest one by one when they saw my name missing. And Danny wrote, Do not set yourself on fire to keep them warm. And I wrote back, I do not even own matches. And then I made my plan. Step 1. Document the uninvite in writing, because families like to pretend phone calls do not count. So I sent a short message to Linda and Mariah and Jason in a new thread to confirm our call. I am removed from this year's trip at your request. Please have whoever is handling logistics take over the bookings and expenses by Friday at 5 p.m. Otherwise, I will cancel the reservations in my name and release the dates. Happy to send the itemized totals. And Linda wrote back immediately with a thumbs up as if thumbs can sign contracts. And then a text. Please wait. We'll figure it out. And I replied, Please transfer the reservations and balances by Friday at 5 p.m. And I set a reminder in my phone because reminders are small clocks that keep your dignity on schedule. And that night, Jason lay on the couch with his hand over his eyes and said, My mother is crying. And I said, She will survive. And he said, She says, You're punishing the family. And I said, The policy says, the person whose name is on the reservation decides if it lives or dies. And I smiled without humor, because dark humor is still humor, and sometimes it is all you have. And Jason said, I hate that I didn't speak up in the thread. And I said, Then speak up now in the way that counts. And he sent a message to the family list. If Nina isn't invited, neither am I. And for 30 bright seconds, I thought we had turned a page. And then Mariah replied, "Okay, babe, that's your choice. No hard feelings. We'll miss you, but we'll save room for you at the fall couples thing." And Jason stared at his screen as if it had mispronounced his name. Friday arrived like a bell, the kind you do not have to set because your body is a better alarm. And at noon, I had received no transfer, no card on file, no email asking me to add someone as the primary on the house. No nothing. Only a call from Linda that I did not answer because I am done with phone call amnesia. And at 3 p.m., I typed a formal email to the property manager for the beach house. "Hello, I need to cancel reservation number X. Policy states free cancellation up to 30 days. We are inside that window. Please release deposit back to the original payment method." And the manager replied in 14 minutes because series of emails from a professional with correct punctuation are catnip to managers. Cancellation confirmed, refund initiated, and I allowed myself one long exhale, the kind you would caption relief if you were a different person. And then I opened the van portal and canceled both. Easy, click, cancel, confirm. And then I called the restaurant and canceled the 12 top under my name because I was not bringing 12 mouths to someone else's table. And the hostess said, "Thank you for calling. It is nice when people are not monsters." And I laughed. And then I sent a message to the thread. "The reservations in my name have been canceled per policy due to lack of transfer. Refunds are processing to the card on file. Your party is free to book new accommodations." And Mariah sent a string of question marks like a bead necklace of disbelief. And then a text. "Are you serious?" And I replied, "Extremely." And then came the flood. Linda called, then texted, "We told everyone we were going. Why would you do this?" And I typed, "Because you told me I was not going, and you chose not to take over the responsibility." And she sent, "Your tone." And I sent back, "My tone is a policy that learned to speak." And then there was silence, the kind that is not empty, the kind that is full of people in another house making faces at phones. The problem did not end there because Act 2 never lets you exit the funhouse without one last warped mirror. Linda posted in the family group that I had canceled the trip out of spite, and now the children were crying. And Danny responded with a screenshot of my initial confirmation text asking them to take over, and the deadline they ignored. And the thread exploded, and Jason came to me with a face like a damp paper towel and said, "Dad wants me to talk sense into you." And I said, "My sense brought your family 4 vacations. This year my sense brought me a boundary." And he sat on the edge of our bed and said, "What if they go anyway?" And I said, "Then they will learn how to plan." And he said, "What if they fail?" And I said, "Then they will learn how to apologize." And he put his head in his hands and said, "I'm sorry I didn't fix it." And I said, "You do not fix me. You stand next to me. Choose." Saturday morning, my phone pinged with a Zelle notice from Linda for $400 and a note that said partial for the deposit, hold house for us while we sort the rest. And I declined the transfer because that is a trick called anchoring. They hand you a small number and call it momentum. Then they hand you excuses and call them bridges. And I texted, "The house was canceled yesterday and is booked by another party now. The vans were canceled per policy. The dinner is canceled. Please make new arrangements." And she wrote, "How could you go around me?" And I wrote, "My name was on the reservations. There is no around me." And she did not respond, because even people who love control know when they have encountered a closed door. By noon that same day, my phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number, a San Diego area code, and I answered because dignity does not make you rude to strangers. And the caller was the owner of the beach house himself, Philip, who had been CC'd by his property manager. He thanked me for canceling early instead of letting them chase the balance and asked if there had been a problem with the property. And I said, "The problem is human, not structural." And he laughed and said, "Well, if you ever need a house again, your emails read like a person who knows how to respect kitchens and glassware." And I realized in that small moment that I had earned a reputation separate from the family that had tried to reduce me to a role. And I put that in my pocket like a smooth stone, even though I didn't think I would need it later. And then I did. Because revenge is not fire. Revenge is a clean record and a clock. At 3 p.m., the group chat lit with a frantic call for help from Mariah. The house they tried to book was already taken. The vans were gone. All the rentals nearby were either more expensive or had minimum stays. The restaurants with string lights were booked for the weekend, and the tone changed from triumphant to tight. And the children, who were apparently crying, had moved on to cartoons. Because that is what children do when adults stop making their feelings a playground. And Danny texted me privately, "Are you enjoying this?" And I typed, "I am enjoying not being punished for saying no." And she wrote, "That's your reward then," and sent a heart that meant ally. The lowest point came not from Linda or Mariah, it came from Jason. Late that night, when the anger in the group had cooled to a shame stew, he looked at me and said, "My sister asked me to drive down with Dad and help them check into a different place that is smaller and less nice. She asked again if I would come even if you don't, and I told her no. And she said she understands, but it would mean a lot to keep the tradition." And I felt grief like a wave then. Not because of the house or the vans or the restaurant, but because of the small ache that comes when a man stands between two women and one is his mother. And I said, "I am not making you choose between us. I am making me choose me." And he nodded and said, "I know." And I said, "And what are you choosing?" And he said, "I am choosing to hold the line with you." And I cried then because I wanted the line to hold, and I also wanted the line to hold without bruising him. And I could not have both. And that is what Act 2 does to you. It asks you who you are when the thing you want has a cost. On Monday morning, with the cancellation window closed behind us and the family group chat full of last-minute motel links and passive-aggressive prayers, I made my last move before the climax. I took a day off work. I went to my favorite coffee shop with the cement floor and the barista who looks like a soft warning, and I opened my laptop and wrote 3 emails. One to the property manager thanking them for the professional handling and letting them know I might be booking a winter weekend for myself and friends. One to the van company praising the clarity of their policy because flattery keeps doors open, and one to the restaurant apologizing for any inconvenience and promising to rebook when the air around me is cleaner. And then I did something that felt like a hinge turning. I used a credit I had been saving and booked myself 3 nights in Sedona at a small inn with a red rock view and a bathtub deep enough to baptize a new self, and I put it under my name, my card, my plan. And I wrote a note to myself on a sticky that I put on the corner of my laptop. "You are not Plan B. You are the planner." And right as I pressed complete, my phone rang. It was Linda again. And this time I answered because if you are going to finish a thing, you finish it with a clear yes or no. And she said, "Nina, we managed a place 2 miles inland. No view. But we're making do." And then she took a breath and said, "I'm sorry." And I said, "For what specifically?" And she said, "For making you a chore and then asking you not to come." And my anger stood up and walked to the door because it had done its job. And I said, "Apology accepted." And she said, "Can you send us the old dinner spot info? Maybe they can squeeze us in." And I said, "I canceled that, and I'm not calling again on your behalf." And she said, "I understand." And then she said, "Are you and Jason okay?" And I said, "We will be." And when I hung up, I felt something settle. Not triumph, something like alignment. The climax had not yet happened. That would come on departure day, when the family tried one last maneuver that assumed I was still the help, even if I wasn't invited. It would come with rental counters and a policy the family did not read, and a phone that rang at a frequency that meant emergency by their definition. It would come with my clean file and my unlocked power turned on in my name, and it would end with me choosing how to use both. But that is part two. And before I got there, I went to Sedona and I lay in a tub and watched the red rock glow like something inside me had been lit on purpose. And I slept without checking a group chat. And I woke and hiked and wrote in a small notebook on a bench and drank coffee while I counted my breaths. And I came home the night before they were to leave for their inland motel by the freeway, ready to answer the next call with a voice that did not tremble, ready to finish clean, ready to be the woman who cancels the reservations in her name and then writes new ones for herself, because that is the skill no one can uninvite. Departure day arrived like a doorbell you knew would ring. 7:03 a.m. My phone lit with Jason's name, and the subject line of his voice was crisis. He said, "They're at the rental counter and the agent won't release the vans because the old reservations were canceled, and now they want my corporate rate. The agent says only the account holder can authorize." And in the background, I heard Linda saying things like, "Surely there's a manager," and Mariah saying things like, "This is insane." And I looked out my window at the Phoenix morning that already promised heat, and I felt my own temperature drop to calm, and I said, "Put me on speaker." And when the agent came on, her voice had the flat volume of someone who had survived weddings and funerals at the counter. I said, "Good morning, I'm the account holder for a corporate portal under Morales Properties. Those reservations were canceled on Friday. I'm not authorizing any new rentals on that account." And the agent said, "Understood. Would you like to book personally?" And I said, "No, thank you." And in the background, Linda hissed, "Nina, please, we have the kids here with their bags." And I said, "I hear the kids. I also hear you ask me to set myself on fire after you told me to stay home to keep your room intimate." And the agent said, "I can step away." And I said, "Thank you. Give us 2 minutes." And she put us on hold with a song that tried very hard to be soothing. And I said, "Here are your options. You can book vans at today's price and pick a different hotel nearer the freeway so you can afford both. You can rent sedans and make 2 trips. Or you can cancel and plan better for another week." And Linda said, "Be reasonable." And I said, "I am reasonable. I made reasonable plans 5 months ago." And Mariah said, "This is petty." And I said, "This is policy." And Jason said, "Mom, I told you this would happen." And Linda went quiet the way women go quiet when they stand in the corner of a room they decorated and realize the chairs don't hold. And then she said, "Nina, what would it cost for you to help us today?" And my anger, which had been standing in the hall, left and closed the door behind it. And I said, "Help. Looks like an invoice and a signature. I will authorize the vans if you pay my day rate as coordinator and sign a family trip policy for future years. No bans without buy-in, no bookings without balances, and if you break it, you do not talk to me next time. You talk to the calendar." And Mariah snorted and said, "You can't make a family sign a contract." And I said, "Watch me." And Linda said, "Send it." And I texted the document I had drafted in Sedona in a burst of clarity. 1 page, 12 lines. The first line said the person who holds the reservations holds the power, and the last line said, "No one speaks to anyone uninvited the way they would not speak to a stranger." And there was a box at the bottom for signatures. And while I waited, I walked to my kitchen and poured water and looked at my notebook where I had written in my own hand, "You are not Plan B." And my phone buzzed with 6 signatures: Linda, Dad, 2 grandparents, Jason, and unexpectedly, Danny, who wrote +1 for witness. And Mariah sent back a selfie of an eye roll and the words, "You're not my boss." And I replied, "Then you don't get my rate or my help." And she burst into tears in the background, and I said, "Take your time." And the agent came back and I said, "Thank you for your patience. I will not authorize releases on my corporate account. My family will book on a regular rate." And Linda said, "Nina, please, this is heartless." And I said, "It is spine." And I hung up gently because you can be gentle and firm in the same movement. And my phone buzzed again 5 minutes later. Danny sent a photo of Linda and Dad at the counter swiping their own cards. And I sent back a thumbs up because emojis can also be policies if you use them like punctuation. By noon, they had 2 sedans and 1 minivan, a Tetris that would double their driving time and have their pride, and my phone was quiet for an hour. And then Mariah texted Jason privately, and he forwarded it to me because we had promised each other no surprise fires. She wrote, "I still think this is cruel, but I'll admit you are very good at this." And he responded, "You could have paid her." And she wrote, "I'm not paying my brother's wife to drive us to a vacation." And he wrote, "Then learn to drive yourself." And the bubble went gray and stayed that way. And I put my phone down and made a sandwich, because sandwiches are practices in sufficiency. At 3, the next crisis arrived right on cue. The Inland Motel had a plumbing issue, and they were moving guests to sister properties and buffeting everyone with noise and vouchers and words. And Linda called me and said, "I know I have no right to ask, but if I send you the voucher, can you find us 3 rooms that connect?" And I said, "Yes, for $200 and an acknowledgement text from the family thread that I am not the problem. The non-negotiable line in your ledger is." And she sighed like a door that needs oil, and she said, "Done." And within 10 minutes, I had them booked in a place that would not be shown in any brochure, but had clean sheets and a pool with 2 functional filters. And I sent the confirmation and the name of the front desk manager, who had agreed to help with extra towels for the kids. And Linda texted the family thread, "Thank you, Nina. We wouldn't have salvaged this without you." And Danny liked it. And Dad liked it. And then the kids sent a photo of a yellow water slide and wrote, "Thanks, Aunt Nina," with 3 hearts. And I sat on my couch and let that line loosen my jaw, because children do not take sides in wars they do not understand. They take slides and nap. The dinner reservation was their next mountain. They asked for the string lights place, and I said, "I canceled it. Your options are a grill on the sand with paper plates and a wait list, or a pizza place with picnic tables and a line that moves." And they chose the pizza and sent a video of the grandparents laughing with slices the size of faces. And I did not feel triumph. I felt my shoulders lower because a truth I had said all week was echoing back from a tiled room with red plastic cups. If you keep trying to borrow a table you refuse to set, you will eat standing up. And that is fine if you put the plates in order and your pride on the counter. The twist arrived at the rental agency on day 3, when one sedan threw a dashboard light and everyone panicked because default settings for families like ours are loudness and blame. And in the panic, Linda called me instead of the roadside number in big type on the keychain. And I said, "Look down, call the number on the tag, speak slowly, say you are on Highway 76 mile marker 12, and when the voice on the phone asks for the reservation name, you do not say Nina, you say Linda, because you are." And she laughed through tears because she was doing it. She was making a call to fix a problem she had rented, and she sent me later a selfie of relief in the passenger seat, and she wrote, "Thank you for making me do it." And I texted back, "I did not make you. I refused to do it for you." And she sent a heart. The plain red kind, not the glitter one, and that meant she had understood a little. The last day of their trip, I was at home with laundry and a book when my phone rang with a San Diego area code again. It was Philip, the beach house owner. He said, "I have a cancellation for the first week of December. Quiet season. The ocean forgets to pretend it's warm. Would you like it? Nights discounted for people who do not break plates. And I laughed and said, yes, I would. And I booked it in my name. And I invited Danny and two friends who know how to put chairs back where they found them. And I did not invite anyone who cannot tell the difference between core family and core respect. And I put a little asterisk on the calendar that said, Nina's Winter Reset. And it looked very good next to the color-coded blocks that were mine. When the family rolled back into Phoenix on Sunday night with sunburns and apologies, we sat around our dining table, and Linda cleared her throat and said, "We need to talk about next year." And I said, "We can, but I will not be taking over as default." And she said, "That's not what I came to ask." And she slid across the table a printout called Morales Trip Terms that looked suspiciously like my one-page policy but with clip art. And I smiled because even copies can be improvements if the copier is learning. And she said, "We would like you to teach us how to do this. Not do it for us. And we will pay you when we ask you to work." And I said, "That is a sentence I can live with." And Jason put his hand over mine, and his mother did not flinch at the contact. And that was a small miracle. Mariah was quiet for the first 10 minutes, and then she folded and unfolded her napkin and said, "I was wrong. I handled this like a person who wanted a free ride and a front row, and I'm sorry." And the apology did not remedy the week, but it righted the table, and I accepted it because acceptance is not surrender. It is a note in a ledger marked paid. And Dad said, "Next year I'll book the vans." And we said, "We believe you when the email arrives with your name on it." And everyone laughed because humor came back to the house like a pet that ran away and found its own way home. The new normal did not crystallize in one meeting. It formed over the next months like salt on glass, slow and exact. Linda started a shared doc where anyone could add ideas. With a budget line that did not begin with my card, Dad called Philip himself to ask about winter weeks and left a voicemail that sounded like a man reading a map for the first time and enjoying it. Mariah took on meals for a church retreat and reported that she had underestimated napkins and overestimated people who claim they eat salad. And she apologized to the committee without blaming lettuce. And Jason and I took a small 2-night drive to Bisbee and did not tell his family until we came home, because privacy is not secrecy. It is oxygen, and we decided our home would be our core family, and vacations with anyone else would be add-ons built after we had booked our own rest. And the fights that followed were smaller and easier to end, because we had a policy. You do not put everything under one name and then call the person attached to that name dramatic. You put things under the names of the people who plan them, and we checked it like a rule because it was one. The unexpected twist came in November when my boss asked if I would present at our company training on boundary setting with clients. I laughed and said, "You want me to teach landlords to say no?" And he said, "I want you to teach our own staff how to not accept emergencies that began as free favors." And I wrote a simple slide deck with 6 sentences and one story about a beach house, names removed, and I finished with a line I had written to myself that night in the coffee shop. "You are not Plan B, you are the planner." And the room clapped like people who had felt their ribs make more space. And afterwards, a woman from another branch came up and said, "I used to be the family coordinator too. I thought love meant I booked the table and also tipped for everyone." And I said, "I know." And she said, "I canceled the dinner once and it felt like I had done a crime." And I said, "I know." And she said, "And then we ate pizza and no one died." And we laughed because pizza is a soft landing that tastes like dignity when you pay for your own slice. The beach in December was cold and honest, the kind of blue that minds its business, and the house had a deck where the morning was a quiet contract. I signed the check-in sheet with my name and a pen I brought from home because my mother taught me not to depend on pens that live by guest books. And I sat with Danny and two friends under blankets, and we told each other stories we would not post, not because they were shameful, because they were ours. And the ocean stayed outside the windows like a guest who knows when to leave the party. And we cooked small meals and washed our plates and left the place better than we found it. And I texted Linda a photo of the view with the caption, "This is a retreat, not a tradition." And she wrote, "We'll see you in March for the planning session." And then, almost as a reflex that had learned, she wrote, "If you want to," and I wrote back, "I will attend and I will not chair." And she sent a thumbs up and a heart. And I thought, this is what it looks like when people learn to walk beside you instead of on you. If you need the last image, hold this. I am back in Phoenix in my kitchen with my color-coded calendar and my portable charger charged. My phone lights with a group chat that has been renamed Morales Trips. All contributors, and the first document in it is called Who Holds What? And the right names are on the right lines. And my name is on a line that says consultant, rate, fair, scope, invited tasks only. And I smile and pour coffee and open my laptop to book 2 nights in a cabin for Jason and me in April. Just us, because we are our own core. And as I press submit, I hear a phantom ring from a call I did not answer in June, and I think, you canceled the reservations in your name, and then you made new ones for your life. And that is not vengeance. That is a calendar with better handwriting. And when my doorbell rings for real, it is Danny with a bag of bagels, and she says, "How's our consultant?" And I say, "Booked." And we laugh, and I bite into something warm that I paid for, and it tastes exactly like being invited by yourself.